Good evening, everyone. We're so glad you're here. I'm Sonia Haugen. I'm a member of the Friday Night Lecture Committee to welcome you here. I'm delighted that you're here. This is our last Friday night lecture of the season, and you won't be disappointed. This evening we have Erik Brakstad speaking about our desire for identity with our heritage. This search remains a strong force in our lives, as expressed by our presence here this evening and by our connections with Nordic Northwest. Erik is certainly no stranger to us. He's a member of the board of directors of Nordic Northwest and has been a member of the Grieg Lodge Sons of Norway for over 25 years, I think. Erik directs the Skogfjorden for Adults, a twice-yearly program in Norwegian language and culture in Bemidji, Minnesota. Here in Portland, he chairs a twice a month, I think it is, Norwegian just speaking group that here and at the Norse Hall. He also maintains a general contracting business with the primary focus on Tivnu, a social justice construction skills gap year for Jewish students. He engages his students in hands-on projects that address Portland's houselessness crisis. So please join me in welcoming Erik this evening.
Thank you, Sonia. So in a way, this started with tattoos, in that I was talking with Mary, a member of the lecture series committee, and she was telling me about the upcoming exhibit out here featuring tattoos. And that was interesting for me to hear about an exhibit like that at a place like this. And it made me think about people that I know in the Nordic community that have chosen tattoos as an expression of their Nordic identity. And I didn't go down this path, and so we're not going to have a PowerPoint presentation with interviews and tattoo slides, but it was a start. But I did come away from that conversation agreeing to this Friday night lecture series about Nordic identity. So I've had the privilege of being invited to this lecture series a number of times since the turn of the century, and my go-to topic is family stories from World War II. And I have branched out from there, but I have to say this topic, Nordic identity, proved to me to be rather overwhelming with the rich variety of research, literature, oral histories that fall under this broad topic. But I'm going to kind of go through a wide range of things here this afternoon, so bear with me. I'm going to talk about the title of this lecture, read a couple passages, readings, talk about a reality TV show, and also talk about some more current events issues before we go to a Q&A, and then in a departure from the way we normally do things, at the end of the Q&A, I'm going to do a little exercise which may take you out of your comfort zone just a little bit. So bear with me there. Okay, first a digression on that I didn't get too far with about where I would go with this. And a question I've wondered a long time, been chewing on for a long time, is do Norwegians, that's my background, do Norwegians cling to their Norwegianness more than other Nordic countries? And this is kind of where I was coming from on this. I've been to, I got shipped off to Norwegian camp when I was 12 years old, and that was a seminal thing for me. Later on, I worked at Skogfjorden in the summer, North America's largest and most developed Norwegian language camp. And, you know, there are, as I've learned, corresponding Swedish, Finnish, and Danish camps. But the Norwegian camps have been around longer. They were established in the 60s, both here in the Pacific Northwest and in Minnesota, out of, I presume, an upswelling of interest in third-generation Norwegian Americans trying to preserve their culture and heritage. And in Minnesota, under the umbrella of Concordia Language Villages, there is a Swedish camp, a Danish camp, a Finnish camp, and the Norwegian camp. And they're all excellent, top-notch programs for young people to become engaged in the respective languages and cultures. But the Norwegian one was established first. It's bigger. There are more people that go through that every summer. And then here in the Pacific Northwest, there are 3 Sons of Norway camps. And as I've gotten to know, there is a Swedish camp called Trollbakken, a Danish camp called Himmelbjerget, and a newly established Finnish camp in Astoria that is thriving. But again, the Norwegian camps have been around longer, and there's more of them and more people have gone through them. So, you know, the question is, you know, really, are the Norwegians more enthusiastic, more stubborn, more sentimental? And as I think about it, you know, of course, being in those circles, I've got a confirmation bias. And so I decided to ask someone who might be able to shed light on this, a man named Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. And he is not the senator, actually. He is the father of my neighbor and friend Brita, and he has a unique distinction, and he's both Swedish and Norwegian, and he has been on the board for many years of the Norwegian American Historical Association, as well as its Swedish counterpart, which is the Swedish American Historical Society, I believe. And he's been an officer in both. And if you met him, you would think he would be, you know, he's a fair-minded, confidence-inspiring guy. And, you know, I don't know him very well, but I heard he was coming in town before Christmas, so I'm like, I'm going to ask him. So I invited him out for a beer at a local watering hole and learned more about his background. And at a certain point, kind of shouting at him in a too loud pub, I tested out my theory on him. And he was, you know, slow to really respond. I think he might be used to these kinds of loaded questions, and he's deft at sidestepping them. But towards the end of the pint, I pushed a little farther, and he rather grudgingly agreed that perhaps there's something to this. And then he went into the usual sorts of reasons that, you know, Norway was subjugated under Denmark for hundreds of years, and then Sweden after that, and didn't get their independence until 1905, and then with such a late independence, that's why they're, you know, so enthusiastic and nationalistic and such flag wavers. And those are my words, not his. But I didn't really get that much from it. And then I went to my friend Amy Boxrud in Minnesota, and she is very active in different aspects of the Scandinavian communities there. She is of Finnish background and Norwegian background, and she also happens to be the executive director of the Norwegian American Historical Association that Ron Johnson sits on. And when I floated this to her, she wasn't having any of it. She's just like, in the circles, music circles, arts and crafts circles, and history circles of the Twin Cities, she's like, there's people of this, of all ilk. And so that's as far as I went with that. And I did not, do the Tuid Heyerdahl sort of thing of go look for more evidence to back up my hypothesis. So, as my friend is the director of Norwegian American Historical Association, so of course I have to be a member, and so I get the Norwegian American Studies in my mailbox, and it's mostly pretty dry, and kind of a bedside sort of thing to help you sleep. But there was a recent 2021 article that really got me, and it's by David Jessup, and he is on the faculty of Gustavus Adolphus in Minnesota, and he wrote this article called "The Immigrant's Dilemma on Teaching Scandinavian Immigration," and this is how it starts. There is a sadness, a pathos at the heart of the Scandinavian American experience. It was felt by Scandinavian immigrants who reinvented themselves in a new country at the cost of leaving behind their families and familiar homes. And it is still felt today by their American descendants, who often long for a Scandinavian identity despite having little to connect them to their ancestors, and even less to connect them to modern Scandinavia. In the Americas, where colonization, slavery, and unceasing waves of immigration have defined and redefined complex societies for centuries, this yearning for identity is common. The Scandinavian American pathos is not unique, but it is real. Yet we do not often see it for what it is. In every oofda coffee mug gathering dust in a Midwestern kitchen cabinet, there's a drop of sadness and an ache for something far away that is almost impossible to grasp. As soon as we know to look for that sadness that underlies so much of both the immigrant experience and the earnest efforts of immigrants' descendants to preserve a fading identity, we begin to see it everywhere. Emigration and immigration are serious subjects. Each individual, life-changing decision to pull up stakes in one country and move to another transforms both the old country and the new, and the consequences are felt for generations. So I wonder what my dad would have thought of that. He was not really into oofda mugs or the cult of lutefisk, but he did have thoughts on the matter, and he did say, once you cross the Atlantic, you're always on the wrong side. And I called up my sister in preparation for this talk and kind of ran my observations past her, and she said that she heard him say something along the lines of that he had 1 foot on each side of the ocean, and that when you're here, you realize what you miss about being over there. When you're over there, you think about what you're missing from over here, and that you never quite feel at home in either place. My sister Liv and I both agree, though, that he never regretted moving to this country, although he did think about it more and more as time passed, and as he realized what it meant to leave your country of origin like that. He did like to muse and philosophize on this matter quite a lot, but I had a high tolerance for that sort of thing. I don't know how my mom put up with it, but a little background about my dad. He'd been an exchange student after the war in 1947 in Iowa, and this was a big year for him, maybe the biggest of his life. He was an exotic foreigner and got a lot of attention. He said he didn't sleep very much that year, and when he went back, he resumed his studies. He told his buddies in Iowa that before you find a wife, you should go to Norway, and you need to see and experience Norwegian women. And he went back to Norway, and in a few years, he married an American there. My mother was an au pair in his hometown, Eidsvoll, and he met her, and they were there for a few years. She learned to speak Norwegian and learned to cross-country ski, but she was from San Diego. So it was, the winters were a little too long, and the lack of fresh vegetables was burdensome for her. So in 1954, they got on a boat and came to America. And he, a few years later, became an American citizen. And in doing so, he had to renounce his Norwegian citizenship. At that time, dual citizenship wasn't really a thing. To him, America was exciting. It was full of possibility. He'd felt constrained in Norway. He had over 40 first cousins. Anywhere you go, somebody knows somebody, and they have expectations about you. To come to America, where he could feel the freedom of anonymity, was exciting to him. He liked that possibility. I think over the years he felt that maybe all this freedom had some consequences that he didn't agree with so much, and maybe if the Americans were just a little more this way and they weren't quite so that way, things would go better. He wrote letters to the editor quite often, to our hometown newspaper, the Bremerton Sun, and then he also wrote to the Seattle Times and Post-Intelligencer, and he got a couple in Newsweek. He voted at every opportunity. He any tax, levy, bond measure, he voted for it, even if he disagreed with it. That was just kind of the way he went. And just as an aside, about 15 years ago, he came to Kramer Hall at Portland State, and he gave a Friday night lecture about his experiences during the war, and showed some photos. Were any people here present at that lecture? Okay. Anyway, he did a great job. And we packed the house, and it was the last time he talked about his war experiences, and so I'm very grateful for then the Scandinavian Heritage Foundation to give him that platform. I guess to sum it up, I'd use two pat phrases that for my dad, the grass was greener, and he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. And this is not unique. And while it's been way too long since I've been to Norway, I did spend a couple years of my life there as a younger man, and certainly felt the pull and felt I guess, what I would describe as when you've gone over there and had that kind of experience, you come back and it's hard for people to relate to it. And then it makes you question where you belong if people at home can't relate to you, but you don't fit there. And this is, I don't think, unique at all either. So another person that I think is quite familiar with this territory is someone who's been a speaker at the Friday Night Lecture Series a lot, Lars Nordstrom. Anybody here? How many people have seen Lars Nordstrom? Okay, he's a great speaker. I would hear him speak on any topic. He's one of those people that makes anything fascinating. He's a poet, writer. He's written some his Swedish American immigrant history books. He's a translator and a farmer. He had an organic grape farm outside of Canby, and I heard him speak at the Friday Night Lecture Series, and he was talking about a book that he had written called 10 New Lives, Swedes in the Pacific Northwest, where he interviewed 10 modern Swedish immigrants. And my takeaway was that unlike people who participated in the Great Migration and come here in an earlier time, who tried their best to assimilate into the new country, wanted their kids to assimilate and kind of look forward and throw away the vestiges of the old country, new modern immigrants that he talked to, and they were Swedes, they were of a different sort. They considered themselves Swedes, even though they'd been here for years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. They're still Swedish, but they just happen to still be living here. And identify as such. And it was really eloquent the way that he brought that out in his interviews, and how the internet and the mobility of this age kind of changes the game from the old school way. So anyway, Lars had the audacity to move back to Sweden a few years ago. So he hasn't been here to talk for a while, but I hope he'll show up again, and I think he would have more to say about another topic that there's a lot going on with in this arena, and that is remigration. And there's different ways to look at remigration, but it certainly is quite an expression of the ambivalence that some immigrants had, is that they went back. And it's always been, it still is, a long way to go back. But back then, the cost and time and ordeal of traveling back was no small thing. And there's different statistics I've seen about it. Some were, say, 1 in 6. Some were never meaning to stay here. It was a temporary thing. But others, some said that they came back if they were a success or if they were a bust. But it's hard to know what that meant. But there's one story that I'd like to read that highlights this, and it is in a book called Family Sagas that came out of Seattle in the 90s. Some of you might have heard of it. But this came about because some people in Seattle decided they wanted to put together a Leif Erikson statue, and they wanted to send it. There is one down near Ballard. I don't remember the story behind it, but they wanted to make another one similar to that and send it back to Norway. And they got it together. They got people to put names of not just Norwegian or Nordic immigrants, but other immigrants as well. You pay, you get your name on there, and then they raise the money to make this statue and then ultimately send it to Trondheim, Norway. Now, as a side benefit of this project, people, when they sponsored their ancestor or plunked down their money and sent it in, they sent in stories. And the stories just kind of came, and then the people who were doing this are like, what are the stories? What are we going to do? So they ended up compiling them in this book, and it's in alphabetical order. And many of the stories are very bare bones, and they don't say much. But when I went through, this one in particular stuck out for me. And this is about a guy named Jakob Høyem, and this is submitted by his grandson, Rolf Høyem, in the 90s. Jakob Høyem was born in 1865 in the city of Trondheim. He was raised in a family with 7 children. Over the years, 5 of them went to the United States, where 3 remained for life. In 1886, he and his oldest sister, Inga, went to Montana, where several cousins and friends had settled in years before. He started working as a shepherd near Melville and got his own place there 3 or 4 years later. His last place was at Howie, about 20 miles from Big Timber. He became a fairly successful sheepman. In 1898, he went back to Norway and married Antonia Snarfeldt, who bore him twins, a son and a daughter. His wife died in childbirth 1 year later, and the child died of food poisoning 4 years later. He went back to Norway and remarried in 1904 and went back to Montana with his wife Mariana. A child was born in 1905, but the baby died of scarlet fever. A second daughter was born in October 1906 and still lives in Oslo. The life in Montana was too big of a strain on his wife, and with sorrow, he sold out in 1908. They settled near Trondheim on a nice farm he bought in 1909. Here, his youngest son was born the same year. Jakob died in 1933 in Trondheim, but his heart had always remained in Sweetgrass, Montana. After nearly 90 years, he's still remembered there. Among older people, his farm is still called Jake Høyem's place. My father, who was one of the twins, returned to the United States in 1926, married, lived and worked in Minnesota until the Depression forced him to leave the country. The war came, and to his bitterness, he never found it possible to return. He died in 1991. There are still many descendants of his sister Inga in Big Timber, Montana. So there's one small story of a back and forth. As I was Googling around, I saw kind of the other side of that, of a recent study of 2017 from a Stanford economist named Ron Abraminski. And this study did something that they claimed had never been done before, and that is using a data analysis of the Norwegian census to shed light on questions about remigration. And in their study, they say 30 million migrants moved from Europe to the United States during the age of mass migration, 1850 to 1913. Yet 1 in 3 of these arrivals eventually returned to Europe, a rate of return migration which is even higher than today. In this article, we ask who chose to move back from the United States to Europe, and how did those return migrants fare upon arriving home? So those are kind of loaded questions, and it's hard to know, but their analysis relied on the 1910 Norwegian census, which is easily accessible and quite extensive. But that year, in 1910, they asked the question in the census, have you ever resided in the United States? So they could use that along with economic data to try and shed some light on these questions. And they compared 3 groups of men, a control group of sorts of men who stayed in Norway, some who emigrated to the United States and stayed, and then some who came to the United States and then remigrated. And their findings were, upon returning to Norway, return migrants held higher paying occupations relative to Norwegians who never moved, despite hailing from poorer backgrounds. These patterns suggest that return migrants had been able to accumulate savings and could improve their economic circumstances once they returned home. Low-skilled men, some of whom faced borrowing constraints at home, that is Norway, used temporary migration as a means to accumulate savings in order to buy land or make local investments at home. Not having access to land is one of the big drivers of immigration from that time. We find that immigrants who hailed from rural areas in Norway were more likely to return, and that these return migrants often settled in their municipality of birth and worked as owner-occupier farmers. So, anyway, that's just another angle of return migration where we can yield some analysis from the numbers of 1910. Now, I'm going to change gears here and go to something very contemporary that sheds light on the question of Nordic identity in the United States today, and that is a reality show in Norway that started in 1910, and it is called Alt for Norge, Everything from Norway. Has anybody seen this? You've seen it, okay. It is for a Norwegian audience, and it is available, most of the episodes, I think, for free on YouTube. But there's also a spin-off from it called Alt for Sverige. And there's also they're on their 10th season. There's also a spin-off, Alt for Danmark, but it didn't get very far, or I don't know what happened. I think the pandemic shut them down before it took off. But so it came out in 2010. I think I started watching season 1 with our kids in maybe 3 years after that, and our kids were little. And they didn't get much access to TV. So this was something where they could kind of feel like they were getting over, because I would let them watch it whenever they wanted to. But let me tell you a little bit more about the premise. They find 10 or 12 contestants here in the United States who consider themselves Norwegian American. And their criterion was simply someone who had roots, didn't matter how distant. And then you send in an audition video, and they choose you. And they tended to choose a wide variety of people to, I think, to a large extent, represent the diversity that is found in modern United States. But they certainly threw in some stereotypes. There was the obligatory bimbo. They play this up, and one of the phrases that we still use in our house is one of them whose clip was, "I like shopping," and then they would have, they like to play on the stereotypes. Of course, there's a gun lover who has lots of guns, or another guy was a big-time wrestler. So they throw these contrasting people who are competing for $50,000 and the right to meet their relatives. It was also a requirement that you have never been to Norway before. And I think in later seasons they loosened that. But so they whisk these contestants to Norway, and a staple of the show. I only watched maybe the first 3 episodes, but they whisk them to a beautiful place in Norway, and the contestants go, "Oh, wow, it's so beautiful here," because it is stunning. And how could they leave a place like this? And then it goes into elimination rounds where they have contests, and every episode someone gets thrown off the island until it's whittled down to one person who gets to meet the relatives. And they play it up. They do things like every season I saw, they had the obligatory cross-country ski relay race. And that is hilarious to see Americans, most of whom have never cross-country skied, try to race and not get eliminated. And some of this show is also, in a way, showing Norwegians' fascination with Norwegian Americanness and the manifestations that it has, and the antics that Norwegian Americans do. And they have the advantage of almost, most people in the Nordic countries speak English very well. The people who came there in this show don't speak much, if any, Norwegian. They don't know much about Norway, and so it's making fun of the Americans, which is a thing. But something came out that I don't know. In the later seasons, they got better at coming to this. And while it is certainly over-dramatized and sentimental and saccharine, they were touching on something that was real, that became evident as the episodes came as the whole thing developed. And in later seasons, they researched, and they did this every season. They got better at it, researching each of the contestants' family. And as they went around Norway, they would whisk someone away to, say, the church where their great-great-great-grandparents were married. And then they'll read an excerpt from a letter, and these contestants, often reduced to tears, they see, here's the place where the wagon picked up your great-great-grandfather who was going to take the wagon to the port to get on the ship. His father dropped on his knees and begged him not to go, but he went anyway, and that was the last time they ever saw each other. And so they play up this sort of thing. And yes, they're competing for $50,000, but it becomes clear that the people in this program are desperately, as they learn more about their relatives, they are hungry to meet them, but only one contestant does. When you are voted off the island, you get a clipboard of the research, and you take it with you, and they all say that they're going to come back and meet the relatives. So this became a strikingly poignant for me. I don't think it was for my kids. My kids liked it because they got to watch TV, but they also they knew how to stand on skis, and they had met their relatives, and so they kind of could feel superior with that. So from there, I'll kind of wrap up here with an article that got sent to me just a few days ago from a colleague of mine in Minnesota who was, interestingly, a competitor of season 1 of Alt for Norge, and I will be working with her at Skogfjorden Adults in Bemidji, Minnesota next week, and I think she said she was going to be watching here tonight. But she sent me this article about, that the article, she said, talked about a Nordic heritage group, and this group named Asatru bought a church in a small town in Minnesota. They are a neo-pagan group that looks to the Norse gods of Odin and Thor and so forth, and bought this church in this town of 302 residents, and are making that a place of worship. Now, they have been labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they dispute that. And it's caused considerable controversy in this town and beyond. And I found another article in the Park Rapids Enterprise where it interviewed Brandy Callahan, and she's a Witan, or a top advisor in the Asatru Folk Assembly. And when asked directly if they will accept members of ethnic backgrounds other than white, her answer was simple. No, we don't allow black people. Does that mean a black person can't come into our church or to our events? No, but our the is based on shared ancestry. The article also noted that she and the two people with her were covered with Nordic tattoos. So the article that she forwarded to me was a response to this controversy, and it was in an online publication called The Min Post by a woman named Nina Clark. And I'll read part of what she wrote. And she says, "The claiming of Nordic culture by this group can feel benign and somehow natural, given our region's long association with Scandinavian heritage. It's all the more disturbing for this very reason. I'm half Swedish by descent, speak Swedish, and love my extended family in Sweden. For years, I've been actively involved in Scandinavian cultural activities in Minnesota. Many Minnesotans with roots in Nordic countries read about a group like this and think, that's not me. I don't share their values and beliefs. Many of us who take pride in knowing and understanding our Scandinavian heritage also appreciate how many Scandinavian countries are known for their progressive politics. We believe they exemplify caring for others in their social welfare programs, in their support of refugees, and in their work for international humanitarian causes. Many of us also feel that we carry those values with us as Scandinavian Americans here in the United States." If Scandinavian Americans are dismayed and disturbed by people and groups that use Nordic themes and heritage as weapons against people of color, immigrants, and indigenous people, we should not ignore this misuse of history and culture, but hold it up for study. By the way, I want to say that I personally know pagans and neo-pagans that are absolutely not racist and like this, but we must, this is back to Nina, we must also acknowledge that we are not neutral. Also through Folkehøyskole and groups like it capitalize on the notion that Nordic people are somehow pure and absolved of guilt because we've averted being labeled as perpetrators and wrongdoers. But in fact, Scandinavians have been party to and beneficiaries of systemic establishment of our country's racial inequalities. When whites removed Native Americans from their land, Scandinavian settlers claimed those same lands through the Homestead Act. When formerly enslaved people were being denied 40 acres and a mule that Reconstruction had promised, Norwegian, Swedes, and Danes and others were able to begin building equity soon after coming to this country of their own free will. Decades later, while blacks struggled to secure fair housing opportunity, Scandinavian Americans bought houses with racial covenants in their deeds guaranteeing segregation for generations. Were those different times? Yes. And the consequence is that now Scandinavian Americans who are white consistently benefit in material ways from the way racial disparity has plagued our country. And even back home in the Nordic region, indigenous Sami, as well as immigrants and people of color, struggle for parity and recognition. So Nordic Northwest is the board of Nordic Northwest, of which I'm a member, has on its agenda later this year to bring up questions like this of inequality and inclusion. And I think that's a challenge for our organization and is a challenge for our times now. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to go, but I think it's going to be interesting and bring it on. So with that, Sonia's going to be taking the microphone around for questions or observations.
Thank you so much. Very interesting background. And interesting, I was thinking about, well, there's some people here tonight that I know have maintained homes in the Nordic countries and go back and forth. Yeah, but I think, and you talk to them, and I don't know which they would think is their primary home. They're here, that's their home when they're here, but when they go to Denmark or Finland or Norway or Sweden, they're Danish or Norwegian or Swedish. It's kind of interesting because we have a lot of members who actually maintain homes in both places. Some of you in this room, I think, fit into that category. So, any questions? I'll bring the microphone.
Thank you, Sonia. Erik, did the title of your speech, of your talk, change? I remember it as being very different a few weeks ago, having to do more with language and identity. Is that correct? What did you study at Reed?
I did study language at Reed, but the title of this lecture, when it first got on the website, it was something else that I didn't choose because the title, some thought it was off-putting, but then I wanted to change it back. So I don't know what the other title was, but it wasn't there for very long. But I guess it wasn't up for very long, so you didn't get a screenshot of it.
No, I didn't know it would change.
Bait and switch, also.
Other questions, comments?
I have a funny question. I'm Kim, and my last name, I'm a Dane, and my last name is Bergenser. So I just wonder how many Bergensers are there actually in Norway, because I believe I'm the only one here in the United States.
I don't know, Kim. Not very many. I've never met a Bergenser.
Well, of course, the guys in Bergen, of course, call themselves Bergensers, but
I'm curious, how many here are native Nordics? Pardon?
First generation immigrants.
Yes. How?
Can we be from Denmark?
Yeah, I can be. A few. How many are second generation, the children of immigrants? And third generation, we got quite a few. And what are the backgrounds? Norwegians. What is the Norwegian background? Swedish background. Lots of Swedes. How about Suomalainens? Only one, my daughter. She's the only one. I was asking about the Finns. If there are some of you who have Finnish background, any others? Just the one. That's interesting. So how about Icelandics? Nobody. That poor little country, there just aren't very many people to start with. So who did I leave out? We got Norwegians? Danes. Oh, and I'm looking right at you. Wow, Danes are well represented. I'm impressed. Why do you think that is? Why do you think?
we are those progressive, we are the best travelers. It's true that the Norwegians had the raw materials, the Swedes processed it, and the Danes sold it. And that's how we started all the companies around the world, the Danes. No one did it from Norway, right? They stayed home.
That's an interesting observation.
I don't know. I think my dad would say that the Swedes are the sophisticated business folk, perhaps, and the Norwegians were the country bumpkins, and the Danes were the friendly ones. But there we are, diving deep into the stereotypes, but often there's something to it.
I have always said that I've never met a Dane that doesn't have a good sense of humor. They're always happy, and I don't know, for many years they were the happiest country in the world, and now you've lost it to the Finns. And you talk to the Finns, and they say, we don't know why we're supposed to be so happy.
There's something wrong with that testimony. The Finns, they pick a small town, and that becomes the happiest place in Finland. They're the happiest people. In Denmark, it was all in Denmark, they asked the Danes, where you're the happiest people? No, we're not aware of that. They're not aware of it. Do your taxes, are you happy? Well, we're okay, but they can't be real.
Yeah.
Sonia, we have a question online, actually. Oh, yeah, Eric, we have a question online from Kyle asking, has there been any difference in remigration among the countries?
I wouldn't know to answer it. I mean, it's a deep topic, and there's a lot of angles on it, but I have no idea.
We have a question here. I'll hold it.
Oh, yeah. I'm curious about language acquisition and how it relates to culture, because I understand you've worked at or been at some language camps for many years. I work in a school where there's language immersion that happens. It's not a Nordic language, but so I'm curious how these kids, especially maybe if they're teenagers, how they view learning a second language that relates to their native ancestry, and if it ends up ever kind of getting used in their daily life, or do they compartmentalize it and it's something they only speak sort of, like, I'm just wondering how that goes.
How does that work? Okay, so you're a language professional, and what language
I work at a school where it's immersion and it's in French primarily, but there's also German, Spanish, and Chinese now.
Okay, well, at the Norwegian camp in Minnesota, they have a returning number, a critical mass of people who come back, of participants who have deeply drunk the Kool-Aid. And so they are enthusiastic about it. And so for newcomers, they have models to show that this is cool. And that helps. Of course, it doesn't take with everyone. And you would certainly think that, what is it when you have a language that is frankly as obscure in the scheme of languages as Norwegian, and you could make the case as impractical because we know they are all high-level English speakers, although last time at Norse Hall, at the conversation group that I lead, a father of a participant came for the second time to Norway, and he admitted that he was one of the only people that had never learned English. He went to gymnas in the late 60s outside of Tromsø in a remote area, and he didn't speak English. But back to the camp in Minnesota, there are very effective immersion techniques. There's modeling, it's cool, but it's not complete immersion. And so you get the thing where kids come back year after year who want to learn Norwegian, and some of them learn online. There's lots of online things, but they come back and they go from 1 week to 2 week to 4 weeks, and the 4-week program is a high school credit program, and you really can learn a lot with that. And so there is this mind-blowing phenomenon there of these kids who've gone through this camp have a good handle on Norwegian. They can speak Norwegian, and they have never been to Norway. And that blows the minds of, well, it blows my mind, actually. And one of those, a person like that came on staff. He was a farm boy from North Dakota. I think he might have studied some in college by then. He sought a place on Alt for Norge, but they rejected him because he knew too much about Norway and he learned too much Norwegian. But anyway, does that answer your question?
Anything else? Oh, I'm coming. We need to have you on the microphone so that people on here. I'll hold it.
We have a group of Danes here who like to still use our Danish. For example, in our book club, we read novels in Danish and discuss it in Danish. It's a small group, but we are 10. I wonder if this is common. We now have a Danish conversation group too, and we have quite a few people that have shown up for that who are immigrants, but they immigrated a long time ago and they don't have any opportunity to use their language now, and they enjoy it a lot. And also we have some second generation who have heard Danish at home and don't have any practice in speaking it, and they show up for this. I wonder if this is the case with the Norwegians too.
Well, there isn't. I've been hearing about this Danish book group. There's no corresponding Norwegian group that I know of. I know that there's a Swedish conversation group for high-level speakers. I don't know if they read books or not. I don't know much about them. Maybe someone here does. But I mean, I think it's natural for people to want to find people to speak their languages with, unlike previous generations where all too many times, and I'm sure people here in this audience have heard about their ancestors who emphatically did not pass the language on to their kids here in America because they wanted to be American. And, that's so much was lost there. And you hear the stories, I wish I had learned this from my parents or grandparents or whatever. But anyway, I'm so heartened to hear about the Danish conversation group that's started. And there is a Finnish conversation group here at Nordia House, which will be starting in April. And we look for a Swedish one in the future as well. People have been signing up for it for when it starts. And I did see at Scan Fair if there were people who were interested in a Sami conversation group or Icelandic, and a few people signed up, but I don't have anyone to lead it yet. But if there's someone out there who wants to take the lead, maybe we could get that going too.
The Finnish language, I'm sure everyone here knows, is not a Nordic language. It's related to Hungarian. And if you've ever looked at Finnish as a written language or heard it, and then you compared that to the Hungarian language and heard it, you say they just absolutely cannot be related at all. But the story is, and this is absolutely true, they all started out in an area of Tibet, moved west, and they came to a point where they said, what are we going to do? And the Finns took the blondes and the vowels and moved north, and the Hungarians took the brunettes and the consonants and moved south.
Huh. Fascinating.
Well, shall we?
Okay, so we're going to end with something that is not normal for a Friday night lecture. And the idea for this came from something I heard on OPB earlier this week on Think Out Loud. And there was a guy on there named Chris Williams. He's a storyteller, and he does something called the Front Porch Sessions. And it's kind of like The Moth. I've never seen it. Michael knows about this and knows him and was like, oh yeah, I know that. But after a story or presentation, he ends it like this, asking the audience to step out of their comfort zone, and as they leave, or the next phase is to find someone that you don't know and ask them a question about what they just heard. So I know for a Nordic-based crowd, this is kind of a stretch, but here, I give you permission to do this and to be extroverted in this sense. So as there are refreshments out there, as you leave, turn to your left or right and ask someone you don't know about their reaction to something they heard. So there you have it.
And
thank you.